Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Commuting Solutions' 7th Annual Sustainable Transportation Summit. We hope you all had a chance to enjoy some delicious breakfast and do some networking before today's event. I'm Erin Fosdick, and I'm the President and CEO of the Longmont Economic Development Partnership. I'm also a member of the Commuting Solutions Board of Directors. A big thanks to everyone for joining us as we dive into this year's theme of transportation innovations bringing people together. I want to thank the Longmont Museum and Cultural Center for hosting us today. Also want to take a moment to point out that any great event isn't complete without some technical difficulties. So you might notice a small screen. We had hoped to have the larger screen down, but technology's not cooperating. So this might be a good opportunity to move to one of the front seats if you're having trouble seeing the screen, because we will be using that a little bit later. Here in Colorado, most of us are guilty of driving single-occupant vehicles. Our days are really packed with responsibilities. We need to get to work, we have other duties that we need to accomplish, and sometimes the car is the most efficient way to do that. What if there was another more environmentally friendly option and a reasonably convenient option that allowed us to spend our travel time and our commute time as we pleased, instead of battling the dreaded Front Range traffic that I know many of us battled this morning getting here? An option that connected employees and residents to the places that they needed and wanted to be, while also helping support placemaking in vibrant urban centers and corridors. The greenhouse gas effect of gas emissions per kilometer of railway transit is up to 80% less than cars. Today, on-road transportation is the second largest controllable cause of ozone air pollution, behind only the oil and gas sector. During today's event, we're going to dive into the possibility of a dramatically improved transit options that provide opportunities for developing sustainable and resilient communities. We're going to learn from experts and policy leaders who are going to discuss how transportation innovations can change our environments day to day and bring people together. We wouldn't be able to host this summit without the generous support of the Commuting Solutions sponsors, so I want to take just a minute to recognize our 2023 presenting sponsors: Boulder County, the City and County of Broomfield, and the City of Boulder. I'd also like to thank our gold sponsors: Colorado Transportation Investment Office, RTD, the Northwest Chamber Alliance, Google, Sterling Bay, and Elevations Credit Union. Finally, a big thanks to our silver and nonprofit sponsors. Commuting Solutions really appreciates your support. For 25 years, Commuting Solutions has been a strong advocate for multimodal planning and an advocate for the expansion of transit in our region. We're grateful to have the opportunity to advocate for the Northwest Metro region in this capacity so that we can work to create even more attractive and accessible region that helps us bring businesses and residents, and also helps reduce our impact on climate. Through our partnership with the Northwest Mayors and Community Commissioners Coalition, which represents the 9 jurisdictions in our region, we've supported the implementation of rail for more than 20 years. Through our collective efforts and really through our persistence, we've been successful in achieving amazing regional investments together. Full implementation of Northwest Rail is promised to our region, and it's a long-standing commitment that we still need to fulfill. We're really appreciative of the RTD Board's commitment to fund the Peak Service Northwest Rail study, to explore starting the service by operating 3 morning and afternoon trains from Longmont to Denver. We're also incredibly excited about the prospect of bringing together Northwest Rail service implementation with the possibility of Front Range passenger rail. Recognizing that the BNSF alignment is being considered as a corridor alignment, we will continue to be a strong supporter of this approach at the federal, state, regional, and local level. And I think it's a really, really exciting time for us to be expanding rail in Colorado. Our state has also started conversations about tying land use and development with transportation investments to address climate. During the 2023 legislative season, this was creating some political divides, but we anticipate that these important conversations are going to continue into the next legislative session. We're pleased today to have brought 2 expert speakers from Washington and Oregon who have implemented similar legislation in their respective states and are going to demonstrate the possibilities for us. We hope you learn a lot during the event today and are inspired by the opportunities that lie ahead for Colorado. With that, I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Congressman Joe Neguse, Colorado's 2nd District Representative in the U.S. House. Congressman Neguse is the chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. He serves on the Rules Committee and Natural Resources and Judiciary Committee, and is the ranking member of the House Subcommittee on Federal Lands. We're thrilled to have him join us today. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Neguse.
Well, good morning. Thank you, first and foremost, for that very kind introduction, a warm welcome. The work that Aaron and the folks at the Longmont Economic Development Partnership are doing every day to support our community here in Longmont is certainly much appreciated. We're grateful to you, and I know our families, our workers, and perhaps most importantly, our small businesses in this community are very grateful for your efforts. I also want to thank the executive director. Where's Aubrey? Where is she? She's way in the back, of course, running the show as usual. Let's give her a round of applause as well for all of her hard work. She's been a great partner, a great friend to our office, and it's been a real privilege to be able to work with her these last few years on some really important projects, which I'll talk a bit about. I thought that, perhaps kind of framing the conversation for today, understanding the distinguished group of speakers and panelists that you'll hear from, of course, Boulder County Commissioner Claire Levy, who's doing a phenomenal job, and your wonderful representatives that you've brought from different parts of the country, USDOT and experts in their respective fields, that I might just be able to frame the conversation a bit. And as I think about the work that this fine group of individuals is called to do, in my view, it requires two things: perseverance and partnership. And I was just talking to one of your board members about those two qualities. And I'll explain why. First, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there was a recent article in the Denver Post, it was just 3 days ago, that polled Coloradans from across our state. And without fail, one of the top issues that percolated to the very top for folks concerned about their daily lives was traffic and transportation infrastructure, being one of the top concerns that every Coloradan feels and experiences, whether they live in Colorado Springs, southern Colorado, or up here in northern Colorado. And with our state's population growing each year, we know that this issue is going to only increase in prevalence. I've lived in Colorado for 34 years, since I was 5 years old, and the state has changed dramatically over that period of time. Population growth has been exponential. It has taxed the infrastructure of our state, and it is clear that we are at a crossroads, an inflection point, where we now need to make some tough choices. But there are great opportunities as well, if we're willing to build the partnerships that are necessary and if we're willing to persevere, to be persistent in that partnership. Let me give you a couple of examples. First, in the last year, we have seen millions of dollars brought to bear across our state and across the country as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law. That law is the most significant investment in our nation's infrastructure since the days of Dwight Eisenhower and the modern highway system was first conceived of, before many of us were alive. Not going to say who wasn't alive or not alive back then, but a law that is having a dramatic impact on our state. And it is by virtue of the fact that we built a partnership in the United States Congress across party lines, and that the president was persistent in making the case that it was time for our country to make a generational investment in infrastructure. And that meant, yes, multimodal. It meant broadband infrastructure of all types. That ultimately is what was necessary to get it across the finish line. And it is having real impacts in our state. The best example, of course, is the $25 million RAISE grant that we were able, with your help, to secure for Highway 119. It's a big deal. And for me, it's a great example of those two qualities, partnership and perseverance. With respect to the former, most of the RAISE grant proposals that our office has worked on in the past, and I think most members of our delegation have historically participated in, are usually from one jurisdiction. It's rare that you have a grant proposal like the Highway 119 grant proposal, where it's necessary to develop connections across multiple jurisdictions. The Boulder County Commissioners, the City of Longmont, the City of Boulder, RTD, Northwest Mayors, City and County of Broomfield, everyone all in on one vision. It is also rare to have a level of persistence that we saw from this particular coalition because, of course, many of you in this room, in this ballroom, worked on this particular grant and know full well that it took us a couple of tries. But we were persistent in our advocacy. Many of you know, I have a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-month-old son, so to the extent that I sound a little bit tired, it's because I was on baby duty last night, so drinking a lot of coffee this morning, because he was up quite a bit. But a few months ago, 2 months ago, right after he was born, we finally had sort of our first day out where we could take Joshua, our son. And so we were driving up to Lyons. They have a wonderful park up there that Natalie, our daughter, loves. And as we were driving up, my wife and I and the kids, I got a call. And it was from an unavailable number, so I knew it was it's either a telemarketer or someone important from Washington, D.C. And Andrea's like, don't answer the phone. I've got to answer the phone. It was a Sunday. So I answered the phone. And she could tell that I was talking to somebody important. And she could see this huge smile on my face. And she's thinking, like, oh, this must be, maybe it's the vice president calling. Or, this is some. And as I get off the phone, it's like, why are you smiling so much? Why are you so excited? Well, we just got this raise grant, and it was Secretary Buttigieg calling to say that this raise grant would be approved for the Highway 119 project. It's like, that's why you're smiling? Not that Andrea, my wife, doesn't care deeply about Highway 119. But for me, it was a big deal, and the reason, in addition to the fact that it's going to have a real impact for the better for generations to come, is because of the persistence that it required of this community. Of folks who continually made the case to our office, made the case to officials back at USDOT in Washington that this was a priority worth investing in. And that level of persistence, that level of partnership is what was necessary to get it across the finish line. There are more opportunities to come. We're going to talk a lot, or I believe you all will be talking a lot today, about rail. We've called on the Department of Transportation in Washington to include Colorado's Front Range Passenger Rail Project in the Federal Rail Administration's newly constructed Corridor Identification and Development Program, which is a program that was created as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. I know that we have representatives from Amtrak who have joined us here today. It's another example, a game changer that will require partnership and persistence. And this community certainly knows a lot about those two qualities, those two skills that I think are required of us to tackle these big challenges that face us ahead. So know that you'll have a partner in our office, that we will continue to be a champion for this community and for the multimodal transportation needs that the community is going to require so that ultimately our children collectively have a wonderful community that they inherit where they can live their dreams and raise their families, start their businesses, and more. And as long as we apply perseverance and partnership, I'm confident we'll be able to do all that and more. So thank you all for all that you do. Thank you for all that I know you'll continue to do, and let us know how we can be of help. Have a great morning.
Thank you so much, Congressman Neguse, for taking some time to speak with us today, and thanks for your continued support and persistence in supporting our region. Now I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Mayor Joan Peck, who's going to provide a brief welcome message to all of our guests. Mayor Peck was elected as Longmont's mayor in 2021 after serving as a council member for 6 years. She's lived in Longmont for nearly 46 years and is really a tireless champion for Longmont. Her policy focuses include transportation innovation and climate protection. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Joan Peck.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to the 7th Sustainable Transportation Summit, and welcome to our incredible museum and city. We're so pleased to have you attending this summit in our community, and we appreciate Commuting Solutions and the Longmont City, for making this event possible. I am not really a great speaker, so hang in there with me. Transportation and the vision of rail and Highway 119 serving Longmont and all of the municipalities on the Northwest Corridor is a topic that I and the Longmont City Councils have been pursuing for years. We can't wait for the rest of the region to be connected to Longmont. It's incredibly important for us as the second largest city in Boulder County to be part of making the vision of rail a reality. I'm also a member of the Front Range Passenger Rail District Board, and I'm eager to advance this significant investment for Colorado. It is my belief that if it was not for the support of our Governor, Jared Polis, and Congressman Neguse, advocating for both the Fast Tracks Northwest Corridor and the Front Range Passenger Rail District, Longmont would still be in a discussion with RTD as an investment that is unattainable. We're proud to be working with the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners Coalition and Commuting Solutions at a federal and state level to heighten our advocacy efforts. And we appreciate the support of our congressional members for their support of passenger rail service to Colorado. We hope you have a productive and enjoyable moment at today's events, and thank you for being here and for your interest to advance rail and transportation for our region. Enjoy the day and the rest of the summit.
Thank you, Mayor Peck, for that welcome message, and thanks for all your support for Longmont and the Northwest region. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Chris McShane, Commuting Solutions Board Chairperson. Chris is a Senior Vice President and Private Banker at InBank. Please join me in welcoming Chris.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Rail has been a longstanding commitment to our region through the RTD Fast Tracks ballot issue Metro Denver voters approved back in 2004. And while those first 6 miles started service about 5 years ago, connecting Denver Union Station to Westminster Station, the rest of that 40-mile corridor has not moved forward and would not for several decades unless we identify new funding, new partnership, and pursue new vision. We're excited to have convened many stakeholders who are intimately involved with the exploration of expanding passenger rail service in Colorado. To that end, there's an exciting opportunity that I think we all should support enthusiastically, and that is the creation of Front Range Passenger Rail. Concurrently, as you'll hear from Ms. Johnson, the RTD is exploring peak service Northwest Rail that would provide a few trips in the AM and a few in the afternoon to start the passenger rail service between Denver and Union Station and Longmont. We at Commuting Solutions envision a reality where there is a partnership between Front Range Passenger Rail, RTD, Amtrak, and the Colorado Department of Transportation, where both interregional and regional service is provided to our communities along the Northwest Rail Corridor. Would that not be an amazing accomplishment for our region? We can be optimistic about making this vision a reality, as today we will learn about how the state of Washington successfully implemented a similar approach. We are also excited to share insights into Oregon's transportation and how land use legislation can serve as a conversation starter, specifically as it relates to Colorado's Senate Bill 213 discussion. This is an exciting time to be imagining these bold possibilities for Colorado. Together, we should think beyond what we have experienced thus far and to bring forth what and to have a vision and to bring forth what previously may have seemed impossible. So thank you all for being here again today.
Thank you, Chris, for that welcome message, and thanks for your continued leadership with Commuting Solutions. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker of the 7th Annual Sustainable Transportation Summit. Julie Meredith serves the Washington Department of Transportation as the Assistant Secretary of Urban Mobility, Access and Mega Programs. Julie has been with WashDOT for more than 30 years. In her current role, she oversees transportation investments of more than $6 billion, bridge and highway tolling, transportation planning, and regional transit coordination. Within these groups, her portfolio includes designing and constructing mega programs, operating complex toll roads, and planning integrated transportation systems, coordinating with regional transit agencies, all with a vision to lead the transformation of mobility and support the agency's goal to build a resilient transportation system that is safe, sound, and smart. We are thrilled to have Julie join us from Seattle for this event. We'll have about 10 minutes after the presentation for audience question and answer, so please stick around for that and think about what questions you have for Julie. So with an eye towards future sustainable transportation in Colorado, there's so much to learn from the innovative transportation efforts being undertaken in Washington. Please join me in welcoming Julie to the stage.
Wow. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to see, but it's really bright. So I'm so glad to be here. She said my name is Julie Meredith, and Congressman Neguse sort of took my thunder, because what you're going to hear a lot about from me is partnership, and perseverance is also a good word. So thanks for having me here. I'm going to share what we've been doing in transportation. There's a lot of land use and transit coordination that Washington State is doing, specifically where I work in the Puget Sound region, where a few of our major metropolitan areas are located, including Seattle and Bellevue. Yeah, I can't see the slides. But in 2022, we at WashDOT combined our offices of Urban Mobility and Access divisions, which includes the Management of Mobility, our planning organization, with our Regional Transit Coordination Division and our toll divisions, with the large-scale transportation programs called our mega programs. These divisions and programs together are responsible for planning and delivery of some of the largest and most complex transportation efforts that Washington State has ever undertaken. As an organization, we look at all phases, from planning and design through construction, with the vision forward on how people travel now and how they will travel in the future, so that we can support our economy, mobility, and the quality of life of Washingtonians. One of our key strengths is our focus on partnerships. Through strong partnerships, we're better able to plan, finance, design, construct, and operate the multimodal corridors and integrated systems. Both the Regional Transit Coordination Division and our Management of Mobility divisions are located in the same organization in Puget Sound, so that we can better partnership with the partners we need to, those at the planning organizations in those locations. The central Puget Sound region, which, as I said, includes Seattle, Bellevue, and areas to the north, south, and east, and if I could see the slide, it would be in orange on the map. It has a current population of over 4 million people and is expected to grow by another 1.8 million by 2050. One of the things that's really set the stage for coordinating transportation, land use, and transit planning in the region in Washington State's Growth Management Act. This act requires all cities and counties in the Puget Sound to adopt comprehensive plans to manage their growth over the next 20 years. Cities and counties are currently in the process of updating their comprehensive plans. They have a deadline for completing their plans by December of 2024, and they will look to manage the growth from 2024 to 2044. The Growth Management Act requires that they conduct an update every 10 years, so they will complete their updates at the end of next year and will be required to complete another one in December of 2034, which, as we know, is a blink of an eye in transportation. Cities and counties are specifically required to include elements in their plan for land use, transportation, housing, capital facilities, and utilities, all which must be supportive of and consistent with each other. There are more recent requirements for comprehensive plans to include climate change and resilience considerations. This growth management framework gives all local, regional, and state agencies a clear picture of what's being planned in each community. It also gives WashDOT the opportunity to engage early in the planning process and partner with agencies to work towards common goals. One of the things that's unique in our partnership and coordination with local agencies in the Puget Sound is that we are all agreeing to work towards a regional, agreed to vision where population and growth will occur. The regional municipal planning organization, the Puget Sound Regional Council, that from now on I'm going to call PSRC, has adopted the regional growth strategy, and this strategy takes a step further than GMA, the Growth Management Act, requires. It directs growth to go within higher density areas in high capacity transit stations. The overall goal of this strategy is to link growth and development with high capacity transit investments in the region, providing a more multimodal travel option shed. We have fostered a strong partnership with our regional transit agency partner, Sound Transit. Sound Transit is the regional authority for the area responsible for planning, implementing, constructing, operating high capacity transit in the region, including bus rapid transit, light rail transit, and a heavy rail transit that operates in the north-south in the vicinity. As an agency, Sound Transit is in a period of significant planning and growth. On the left side of the slide, you can see their current light rail system, which is about 20 miles. And on the right side is their expanded system, more than tripling to 60 miles worth of light rail and a parallel BRT system on the east side. There will be over 100 bus rapid transit and light rail stations either on to or adjacent to WashDOT facilities in the future. The Regional Transit Coordination Division works closely with Sound Transit to advance multimodal transportation in partnership, both in planning and informing agreements for operation and maintenance alongside WashDOT's facilities. And I should say that the expansion that Sound Transit is undertaking requires a strong partnership, and it reflects a $40 to $50 billion investment in the system. Just an example of the strong partnership we have with Sound Transit. As some of you know, working in transportation, many of us are experiencing increased costs across the corridors, higher than estimated contractor proposals.
Can I help you?
Oh, no, I don't need to see it. Thanks, Sue. On a recent project, we had a project that was included bus rapid transit, which is Sound Transit's component, in conjunction with the development of our express toll lane systems on Interstate 405. We shared the cost of the program, 80% being paid for by Washington State DOT, 20% by Sound Transit. The bids came in significantly higher than either agency anticipated. WashDOT and Sound Transit needed to work together to determine what the next steps were, how to make decisions in a timely fashion to meet the contractor contract dates. In addition, we had very different governance structures to work through. It was only because of our strong partnership that we were able to coordinate decisions in a timely manner and agree to move forward to execute that contract. So as a result, you'll see express toll lanes and the bus rapid transit system meet the goals and deliver on time for the citizens. In addition to supporting the regional growth strategy through our partnership with Sound Transit, we also partner with the Puget Sound Regional Council through our management division. The Management of Mobility Division reviews local plans in King and Snohomish counties, two of the most populated counties in the region. Reviewing the plans allows us to provide comments and influence. So we look for project consistency between WashDOT and the local agencies. We look for complete streets. How did they address climate change and equity? And we make sure that they have a robust engagement plan so that everyone can contribute early in the planning process. While this is one of the primary ways we have, it gives us an opportunity to provide input on land use. We are limited at Washington State DOT because we do not have formal authority to approve or deny the plans. So again, it's through the strong partnerships that we have that we can influence the process. Some of the examples I'm going to offer on this, an example in Spokane, Washington, which is on the east side of our state. The city had annexed a rural area way back in 1981, and as the annex process, they offered and planned to build promised arterial streets. After development, and with even more housing proposed, and without building the arterial streets they'd planned, safety issues were identified where the local community was really having issues accessing WashDOT system. Safety improvements were needed. So rather than the $40 million arterial improvements that were necessary and identified up front but never built, a $500 million interchange was proposed by the local jurisdiction. WashDOT, in response, and after much consideration and discussion, proposed potential median closures along the state highway if any more development was approved. And this allowed us to gain a seat at the land use table, and we were able to partner with land use groups and the city for a more reasonable and measured build-out plan. And this is an example where the citizens share a higher cost that could have been avoided had transportation considerations been more involved upfront in the land use decisions. Another example, which is a more recent example in Puget Sound, is where a local municipality is proposing a future land use change, a change to the vision that we've all agreed to, meaning the proposed growth that they would like is outside the current growth boundary. In addition to concerns that WashDOT has about it varying from the agreed-to vision, it has the potential to impact our facilities that directly border the change. We are currently constructing an interchange, more than $200 million, which was a supported investment by the local community and a very desirable upgrade to the interchange, that if the city is successful in changing the boundary, we will be making the interchange potentially obsolete by the time they do the change in the growth. This is something that I'm watching very closely, and that really shows why alignment with the regional growth strategy is critical for all parties. It emphasizes the importance of a regional growth strategy because without it, the pattern that I just described would be more common. Not all of our coordination and review of the land use plans is to correct something that we see going wrong. Through land use review, we are able to work with the agencies to influence the policy decisions that impact travel choice and the travel experience. Review and provide comment letters on growth alternatives that the cities are considering as part of the environmental impact statement processes. And in this role, we identify and support the alternatives that is most closely aligned with WashDOT's transportation goals. As an agency, we see several additional ways to advance the integration of land use and transportation decision-making. Roger Millar, our Secretary of Transportation at WashDOT, is committed to changing the future of mobility and is a leader in the country in many of these things that I'm going to talk about. He has advocated that transportation needs to be in the land use business. Transportation and land use is tied to housing decisions because having to travel long distances to find affordable housing becomes an affordable housing and transportation issue. Being able to live and work near transit centers allows people to grow personally and professionally without being stuck on our interstate for many hours. Developments and expansion without transportation involvement often leads to more expensive fixes for WashDOT and our customers after the fact. And we need to make it easier and safe to shift to shorter trips and partners with cities and counties up front on these goals. We see the single most impactful way to influence vehicle miles traveled is to make smart land use decisions. Transit and bicycling enhancements and other strategies do play a role, but none affect vehicle miles traveled as much as land use. We can grow the economy, for example, but when that means that people have to live further and further from where they work, becomes a problem. Another key factor we have, the zoning. Housing is not affordable across Washington state, and nationally we know that this is a trend, and land use decisions play an important factor. Too much land is limited to just single-family housing. Some people cannot afford to live near the activities and the work that they need to participate in. They live further and further away and are often forced to drive as opposed to riding transit, walking, bicycling, any other mode. It's not equitable, and it creates more traffic and more pollution. These are the trends that we see as a transportation agency, where we're being forced to address a land use problem through transportation systems. In addition to opportunities for better connecting land use and transportation planning, we are incorporating resilience and equity into our planning and decision-making. As an agency, our strategic plan provides the vision, mission, and values that guide our decision-making. The plan is focused on 3 key areas: resilience, workforce development, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as you can see, these goals overlap each other. Each one bleeds into the other one, and it's important to note that they work together. For this day, I'm going to talk about resilience and equity, which are embedded in our future planning. We've defined resilience as the ability to prepare for and adapt to changing conditions and withstand and recover rapidly from disruptions. For our agency, that means being prepared for anything that comes our way, disruptions of any kind that affect the movement of people and goods throughout our state. In Secretary Millar's words, a resilient transportation system also needs to be safe, sound, and smart. Our resilience goal states that we will plan and/or invest resources to improve our ability to mitigate, prepare for, respond to emergencies, combat climate change, and build a transportation system that provides equitable services, improves multimodal access, and supports Washington's long-term resilience. And if anybody looks that up, we borrowed heavily from FHWA on that as well. So we take good ideas. We want to reduce our transportation system's contribution to climate change. And as you heard here today, transportation is one of the major contributors to our state's greenhouse gas emissions, almost 50%. We also want to proactively build, operate, and maintain a transportation system that can withstand the effects of climate change and be an equitable system that all can access. With this goal in mind, we are thinking about resilience as we look at our system and applying safe, sound, and smart principles to our expansion considerations. This includes new systems and technologies, ramp meters, express toll lanes, other options to explore, like what happens when automated vehicles are out? What happens to the notion of mobility as a service? What about other modes like bicycling and walking? And at a multi-regional level, this means thinking about crossing modes, including highways, exploring high-speed rail, and incremental improvements to Amtrak. What about aviation? Thinking about all those modes. This is the thinking that led to the Cascadia High-Speed Rail and I-5 program. The Cascadia megaregion, connecting metropolitan Portland, the greater Seattle area, metropolitan Vancouver, British Columbia, these areas have experienced significant growth in recent years, with more than 3 million people expected to move into the region in the next 30 years, a more than 30% increase. Our regional leaders have an opportunity to choose how they respond to this growth. We are collaborating with the state of Oregon, the province of British Columbia, the private sector, and regional partners to explore how high-speed, high-capacity corridor can better connect the Cascadia megaregion, High-speed rail, along with other investments in transportation, can have significant potential to link the metropolitan areas of Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver, British Columbia, and to transform our region and make it more resilient. Last year, WashDOT started to work and begin a master plan for the I-5 corridor from Canada to Oregon. At the same time, the ultra-high-speed ground transportation study was in the process of submitting a grant application for federal funding to advance planning and engineering work for a high-speed rail connection between the areas of Portland and Vancouver. We see an opportunity to integrate these two planning efforts into one program. The program will work closely with WashDOT's aviation division to understand how air mobility can play a role in supporting future mobility within our state. This is the first time in my 30-plus year career that we have been looking at all these modes together in agency, and it will require an even stronger partnership with our local, state, and federal partners, as well as our tribes, the communities we serve, and private industry. I look at it as, how do we keep I-5 resilient? It is the backbone of our state. And how do we preserve it and grow it to be the asset it can be while we look to the next 75 and 100 years? And how can we support our economy, mobility, and maintain or improve our quality of life? The engagement will be coordinated effort. We will work closely with our municipal planning organizations and our local communities to talk about what kind of future they want and the role that land use planning will have in that. Sound Transit will also be closely involved in planning for multimodal connections. We are being challenged to think long-term and deliver on the state's transportation investments. But in order to plan the future, we need to think bold now. It's an incredible opportunity to advance our goals, to think of sustainable growth, to be resilient and have equitable engagement. I know it's going to be a challenge. It's the thing that keeps me going here at WashDOT, and I'm looking forward to the challenge. So thank you again for inviting me here. It's been great to hear, and perseverance is what it's going to take for all of us to bring these things to fruition. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that inspiration. It's great to see that you're doing so much in Washington. We have some time for questions. We can use a microphone if needed, but if you can just raise your hand, questions for Julie. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes. And if you don't have questions, I have questions, but I want to make sure we give the audience time. Yes. We'll see if we can hear you in the back.
Hi, Julie. Randy Grover with Commuting Solutions. What's the proposed speed for your high-speed rail project?
It's really in its early stages, but we were looking at high-speed rail or ultra-high-speed rail, so up to 250 miles an hour. And I will say, we are a long way from decisions on high-speed rail. This is the very beginning, but it's so exciting to be here. And it will advance if we're successful through the federal grant program. So we're looking forward to those decisions, which would happen later this year.
I was just wondering, you mentioned heavy rail. Is that diesel engines or is that electrified?
It's Amtrak, so I believe it's diesel, but it's not in my wheelhouse so much. It is Amtrak, yep. Yes.
Where did that site come from? What was
I think it came from Smart Growth America. Yep.
Thank you, Julie. John Putnam, formerly of USDOT. Had a couple questions about autonomous vehicles and advanced air mobility and other aviation integration. Interested in how Washington DOT is thinking about how you make those support solid transit and rail as opposed to being
It's a great question, because we have never done planning in consideration of air mobility before. But Washington State is looking at significant growth in air travel, and our airports are struggling to meet those needs. So we're going to be looking at how does air mobility serve, say, within the state of Washington, and how does a light rail system, how does a high-speed rail system, how do those partner with each other so that we can make the most of the investments, so we don't overlap? And what does that mean for the footprint? So we want to make smart choices about where we apply our funds. We also want to make smart choices for climate change. So we want to make multimodal connections easier and more efficient for everybody. And you can tell that the footprint at an airport is very significant. So how do we serve and make the most out of those connections?
Hi, Carla Pettis with HDR. You talked a little bit in one of your slides about the partnerships that you have with your state, your local and regional partners. Do you have any sort of formalized governance process associated with that?
We don't have any formal governance with those partnerships, but I will say Sound Transit started as an agency in 1996, and how do you have a partnership and not overlap? I think for the first 5 years as an agency, we knocked elbows with Sound Transit for quite a while. We had to learn to work with FTA as the Washington State DOT. That was news to us that there was another federal agency out there. So we worked it took a few years to figure out how to work with FTA and FHWA, but I will say that our staff can converse now with Sound Transit about the needs for light rail and what their footprint is. They can talk to us now about what we need to make our systems function. And I'll say that doesn't mean we agree. That doesn't mean we just all sing on the same sheet all the time. But I think we can have really good conversations, and we both know and understand the other side. That's a partnership. And when we have a shared vision, our leadership is really supportive of light rail in the area. We're really supportive of transit, and that makes my job easy when we need to partner.
Other questions? Do you have, yes?
Andy Carson, Front Range Rail. How is the current system funded, or has been funded, if you're able to speak to this? And what kind of funding are you looking for the expansion moving forward?
Which system?
The existing system that you have now with Sound and the one that's going to be expanded?
So Sound Transit is funded through a tax in the Puget Sound region. So they have a sales tax for them. And it's funded up to, I think it's between 40 and 50 billion to expand the system out. When high-speed rail that I was talking about, we applied for two grants. We won't know until the end of the year whether we were successful. I mean, fingers crossed that we're going to be able to be successful through that process. Did I answer your question? Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, ma'am.
David Singer, CDOT. Curious about the mega program model. Can you talk a little bit about the synergies and challenges of one program delivering, moving a lot of these ideas through project delivery?
Yeah. So you work for CDOT. So WashDOT, probably like CDOT, is broken up into regions, 6 regions. Those regions do planning, they do maintenance, they do capital delivery, and when something happens, the focus is on that something. If there's a slide, all the geotechs are over there fixing the slide. If there's a bridge issue, they're right there. Maintenance and preservation take first front. Operations take first front. And that perseverance it takes to deliver a mega program, you've got to be singular focused on just the delivery. You can't run off and do the pass clearing because you've got to do your work on the mega program. So by having a team that's simply focused on the delivery of this program, that's what it takes to deliver those systems. So on the program, you'll see the SR 520 bridge replacement and HOV project. I started that program in 2003 when they passed a transportation package. It took probably 6 or 7 years since 2003 for us to get a half a yes on that project. And it was to replace a bridge that was vulnerable. It really needed to be addressed. So it's with that singular focus that it takes to gain how to get to yes and then to implement it. So those projects that were listed as mega projects, 520 is a $5 billion program, 405 is a $3 billion program, the Gateway project is another $3 billion. I mean, these are significant investments in the system that address either seismic vulnerability needs. 520 was a wind, weather, seismic vulnerability need. They all include multimodal features, are heavily transit featured, or the Gateway program is doing connections to our ports for our economy. And all of our mega programs include a portion of tolling or express tolling as part of them. So we're trying to do the look forward to the future.
I think we have one more question that I saw.
Devin Edgley, Boulder Chamber. I'm interested in learning more about what equity lens this transit plan is being viewed through, and to see how that can reach through marginalized communities as transit starts expanding.
Washington State just passed the HEAL Act and the PAIR Act. Both have equity portions of it. So we'll be looking at all the investments we do through an EJ lens, which we're just beginning that today. We were required to update our strategic plans, which I was a part of. I was part of updating it for resilience on the goal. We had other teams who updated it for diversity, equity, and inclusion in workforce. But we updated it for EJ in January so that we have that throughout our system. I will say that one of the things we've been doing at Washington State, since you asked, is looking at our hiring practices. So we make sure that we look at the candidates we got. Made sure we did outreach as broad as we could be. I will say we struggle to get candidates, senior level candidates that meet our diversity and equity standards. We're far more successful when we're getting less experienced candidates through the door. So the young people that come to us are actually helping us be more diverse, which helps, I think, in our thinking process going forward. So all our investments starting this year over, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's over $1 million. We'll need to go through an equity assessment to see how we meet the goals of the state. And we also have an outreach plan that talks about how we do equity engagement. So on State Route 167, we did a new master plan for that corridor, and we put together a specific group that looked at equity in communities, equity in access, equity in the neighborhoods. So we specifically took all our ideas to that group, and we said, where did we have gaps? So they helped us define it. Another thing we've been doing is it's a challenge for everybody to get to the table. So there are opportunities for us to help fund their time at the table. We take that chance too. So we're trying everything to get everybody's voice at the table to give us input.
Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your experience on these important topics.
I'm so glad I could come here.
Yes. And thanks so much to the audience for your thoughtful questions. That was really great. The good news is we have a break now. Everyone can get up and stretch. We have a snack out in the Swan Atrium. This is where you had breakfast. We do ask that you be mindful of the time. We'll start back in about 15 minutes, so please be back in your seats at 9:45. You'll just walk right out the door here. Take the time that you need to refresh, say hi to your colleagues, and we'll meet back here in 15 minutes. I think the bright light on my face is our cue to go ahead and get started again. So thank you for coming back after that break. I hope you had a chance to enjoy some networking, some refreshments. I'm really pleased to introduce the next portion of our event, the expert panel. The panel will be led by our moderator, Boulder County Commissioner Claire Levy. Commissioner Levy was elected to the Board of County Commissioners in 2020. In 2023, Commissioner Levy serves as the chair of the Board of County Commissioners. Her other leadership roles include serving on the Board of Directors for the Denver Regional Council of Governments, serving as a member of the Northwest Mayors and Commissioners Coalition, and serving on the Board of Directors for the Front Range Passenger Rail District. Please join me in warmly welcoming Commissioner Levy. Yeah, you can. Nope, I can't. Scooch it back here. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, hello and welcome. I'm really thrilled to be able to moderate this amazing panel that we have here. As Erin said in her introduction, I'm Boulder County Commissioner Claire Levy, and as chair of the Board of County Commissioners and as our representative to the Northwest MCC, and also a member of the Board of Directors of the Front Range Passenger Rail District. So putting all of those together, you can see that I am spending a lot of time on both local and regional transportation issues. And I'm very passionate about delivering passenger rail for our Northwest region, and pleased to serve as the moderator for today's panel. We're excited to convene stakeholders this morning to discuss the future of intercity passenger rail in Colorado, and specifically along the Front Range. I would like to thank everyone for your participation today, and in advance, I'll thank our expert panel for their contribution to the discussion. So to start our expert panel portion of today's event, we'll just take a few minutes for each panelist to just quickly introduce themselves with your name and your title. And we'll start with John Putnam, who currently doesn't have a title, but you can tell us what your former title was.
Thank you, Claire. As Claire mentioned, I am John Putnam. I'm just going to go by Transportation Geek. Right now, I am between positions. Most recently, I was General Counsel of the United States Department of Transportation. Before that, I was Environmental Programs Director for the state, and then before then, had a couple decades of service working with states and local governments on transportation and environmental issues.
Yep, thanks, John. David?
Good morning, my name is David Singer. I'm with the Colorado Department of Transportation. My title is Assistant Director for Passenger Rail. I've been with CDOT for 20 years and I've worked on corridor development, US 36 when I first got started, and moved on to the I-70 Mountain Corridor. So always kind of drawn to exciting, complex corridor projects.
Great, thank you, David. Deborah?
So first and foremost, thank you very much to Commuting Solutions for the opportunity to engage with you on an issue in which I'm very passionate about. My name is Deborah Johnson. My functional title is the General Manager and CEO of the Regional Transportation District, but I like to qualify myself as a person in the people business, recognizing that public transport unleashes people from their limitations and provides access to opportunities. I've been in the public transportation arena now going into my 32nd year. I've had the opportunity to work in a myriad of different communities across the country, ranging from Washington, D.C. to various communities in the San Francisco Bay Area, as well as Southern California, now here in the metropolitan Denver region. And this is the 7th transit agency for which I work, and I pride myself on being the voice of the voiceless, bringing the voice from the bus stop into the boardroom, which we'll pretend this is one, and we'll speak about that today. So thank you very kindly for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Deborah. And Dennis?
All right, good morning, everyone, and I'd also like to thank Commuting Solutions for having me here and putting this forum together. I am Executive Vice President of Strategy and Planning for Amtrak, and been Amtrak for about 6 years. Spent a lot of time in my career in transportation. I was in the airline business for a long time, and then did a sojourn in telecom for a few years before coming back to transportation. And though I work at our headquarters in Washington, D.C., that's actually home away from home. I actually live in Colorado. So I've got my own personal vested interest in seeing Front Range passenger rail come to fruition.
Okay, thank you to all. And I do want to acknowledge also that the general manager of the Front Range Passenger Rail District is here with us, Andy Karzian. Talk to Andy if you have detailed questions about the Front Range Passenger Rail District. So I'm going to start by just providing some background, some context for the discussion that we're going to have for folks who have not been here in the Front Range with us for the last 20 years or so. So in 2004, the RTD Fast Tracks ballot issue was approved by the voters to provide funding for light rail, commuter rail, and bus rapid transit service in the Denver region. But full realization of this plan has stalled over the last 15 years. Building on Fast Tracks, Colorado has taken successive steps to advance passenger rail in our state. In 2009, the Division of Transit and Rail was created within CDOT. And in 2017, the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission formed to continue efforts to preserve and advance Amtrak's Southwest Chief service in Colorado and to lead efforts to develop new intercity passenger rail service to serve the I-25 corridor. In the last few years, federal and state opportunities have breathed new life into the goal of substantial passenger rail expansion in Colorado. And in 2021, the Colorado legislature took a historic step, creating the Front Range Passenger Rail District, and it serves as the successor to the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission. So the district is a new local government. It is a special district, and it's the largest special district in Colorado. Its boundaries span portions or the entirety of the 13 counties that border I-25 from New Mexico to Wyoming. And the Front Range Passenger Rail District is responsible for designing, financing, constructing, operating, and maintaining a passenger rail system along the Front Range. The district is going to be a powerful new tool to advance intercity rail as the district can raise the funding and provide the governance necessary to bring intercity rail to our state. The 2021 Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is providing $1.2 trillion in federal funding opportunities to support transportation infrastructure improvements across the country, with $66 billion of those dollars having been identified for rail improvement projects alone. Governor Polis has made clear that transportation innovation, including the development of intercity Front Range passenger rail service, is a major priority in his second term. Although the route has not been finalized, if I can speak on behalf of the Northwest Metro region, through my role on the Northwest MCC, I would say that we in this region enthusiastically support the prospect of Front Range passenger rail and expanding intercity regional access. We're studying whether Amtrak should be the operator of this new regional passenger rail service, and we look forward to hearing more from our panelists about these potential partnerships and the opportunity Front Range passenger rail service provides to potentially implement RTD's Fast Tracks Northwest Rail project. So with that rather lengthy background in mind, I would like each of the panelists to take about 5 minutes to share your perspective on the partnerships and the contractual commitments that would be needed to bring Front Range passenger rail to fruition. And I think we'll just start. I love the way you're lined up here because I think that is the right way to go about addressing this. So if we could start, John, with you, and in about 5 minutes.
Terrific. Thank you, Claire, and thanks for the invitation, and thanks for Commuting Solutions for bringing me here today. Here's the exciting news. We're actually in Infrastructure Week. We've been talking about Infrastructure Week for seems like decades. To Representative Negus's point, we have a historic moment, historic opportunity through the bipartisan infrastructure law. But it's limited. It's a 5-year bill. It's not enough. And you've got some strong competition, as you've seen from the presentation from Julie this morning. So in addition to, I think, the framing that he provided, which I think is excellent, about partnerships, I'd add two other words to the mix. One is performance. To compete with the others for this money, because it's going to be oversubscribed, you've really got to perform and you've got to really make a great case to show why Colorado deserves this money and this project deserves this money, or projects deserves this money. And then I would also add urgency. We're 2 years, almost 2 years into the 5-year period of the bipartisan infrastructure law. A lot of that money's already gone out the door. A lot of it will be awarded over the next few months. And so, if Colorado wants a share of that, you've got to work on that. So persistence, but urgency and performance, and I know there's a tension between them. And one of the things that the Front Range Rail District, the state, and all the partners need to work through is just how to balance, not going too fast, but going fast enough. And one of those places that I think is really important is partnership. Like marriage, means sometimes you have to have hard conversations and work through hard issues. And I think we're in that same place for project development here. So let me talk quickly about the opportunity. As Claire noted, there is $1.2 billion in the infrastructure bill. There's $66 billion assigned for rail, and that's just for intercity rail. It doesn't include what FTA has, which is another significant chunk of money for commuter rail, light rail, other sort of programs. Within that, $36 billion is assigned under the Federal State Partnership Program. That's been the kind of premier tool for building intercity rail, and Congress assigned $36 billion of advanced appropriations. It also said there's a possibility of it adding additional money in the normal appropriation cycle. What we're seeing, since we don't have a budget for this year, we don't have a budget for next year, is that that's a target for some of the Republicans in the House of Representatives right now. They've aimed at FTA's CIG program, which I know Deborah cares deeply about. They've aimed at the federal state partnership. So I think for now, we probably have to assume that $36 billion is what's out there. From that $36 billion, $12 billion has been assigned for national programs off of the Northeast Corridor, basically the kind of key route between Boston and Washington, D.C. As you heard just with the flavor this morning, there are a lot of projects that are chasing after that money. So one of the things that Congress did in the bill, and FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration, is implementing is this new program, Corridor ID, and really intending to create a pipeline for projects similar to the pipeline that's part of the capital investment program that FTA has run for years, to really go from soup to nuts and help bring projects to the fore. So the capital ID program was formally set up last year. There was a notice soliciting requests for that. Colorado did apply with all the partners, Front Range Rail District, good to see you, Dave, along that project. You've got 90 competitors in that program right now. FRA is intending to make announcements on who made the cut in November. And even within the folks who do make the cut, that's not a guarantee that you'll actually get to the actual construction funding and further advanced funding in the federal state program. But it's a critical opportunity. Congress identified in the bill that if you are selected to be part of that Corridor ID program, that is a plus factor, a preference factor in the award of those grants. And so it will be incredibly important, both for the money. It will allow an instant $500,000 to do basic scoping work, move on to a step 2 that only has a 10% local match to do the service development plan, which I know has already started. And then a third stage with a 20% match to do the kind of project development work that will be needed to really kind of ripen things up to hopefully compete for some of that money. But we've got 3 years, probably 4 NOFO cycles, notice of funding opportunity cycles left in that piece. And so, the pressure is on. In terms of the question about contractual arrangements, a lot of that work will go into applications to support both the corridor ID process, but also ultimately an application for that federal state program. It requires agreements with a potential operator, that may be Amtrak, that requires agreements with the host railroads, probably 2 in the case of Front Range Rail, as well as the sort of partnerships, local match arrangements, financial arrangements. There's a lot of work to be done, a lot of marital issues to be resolved in order to be able to make that claim. That will ultimately lead to grant agreements. Every step of the Corridor ID program will have a contractual arrangement with the Federal Railroad Administration, as well as any construction grants that are provided on that front. So with that, happy to look forward to questions and discussion with the rest of the panel. But I think, going back to the persistence and urgency point, I think you've got to master the details because Washington, DOT, Sound Transit, Texas, and others are doing that. But you've also got to have that compelling story backed up by numbers, backed up by solid data. Why do we deserve this money? And none of the 90+ other projects out there. Actually, some of them will get that money too. But there's a real competition here. And how do we justify for Congress that this money should be renewed when that 5-year period is up? Because we know that the 5-year bill is historic, but it isn't close to enough.
Well, thank you, John, for that. I think you can tell immediately, and you probably already knew how lucky we were to have John in the DOT in the first place, and now to have him back here in Colorado with that knowledge that he brings to this. So David, could you bring your perspective from CDOT?
Thank you, Commissioner. I think this group understands that partnerships are essential. No one entity can advance a mega project
You might
alone.
want to pull the microphone a little closer.
Closer? Okay. It's important to open up the tent and bring stakeholders and various perspectives in so that everyone can help shape and deliver that vision. It's also important for each entity to bring their role and their strength and know that responsibility. And that's part of that marital conversations is kind of, Julie talked about bumping into each other in early stages, but I think getting a rhythm on these complex corridors is really essential. The project manager for the service development plan, which I'll talk about later, but I'm coming from a technical perspective, and performance is something that I wanted to dig a little bit deeper in. We know that the passenger rail doesn't start and end at the platform. Having other trips, having transit, having a high-functioning multimodal system is really important. So it's RTD, but it's also Transport and Mountain Metro and Outrider and Mustang, all working in harmony so that all those systems can complement one another and get to a higher performance. Same with scooters and bike and ped, so it's an integrated system. I think about customers as partners, so looking at our academic institutions within the corridor, we know that students are early adopters and are willing to change their behaviors to take a train, and so understanding their behaviors and implementing their needs into our service options is really important, as is special events, tourism, recreational trips. Those are kind of some of the characteristics of a long-distance service. So all of those activities that are happening, whether it's our retired, our disabled population, our veterans, all tourism, folks who are coming here and using the train as part of the experience. Again, that fits into and defines our service options. And then finally, our business community, are there chambers, are there business improvement districts at the local level that will help? We're looking to target major markets, and so there's our high population and employment centers, and so that's a part of the partnership as well. For all the things that CDOT brings, whether it's engineers or modelers or biologists, there's limits on what CDOT can do. So we look to NGOs, we look to TMAs to help promote and market and advocate for this idea. And so that's going to be an important partnership. And I say that not to pander, but I know the role that Commuting Solutions and the like have had in delivering important projects. Governance at the local level is really critical. Communities that do local planning looking to the future, we've talked about land use earlier this morning, but that demonstrates their readiness. Longmont and Boulder and communities along the corridor have done station area planning that it shows that they're forward thinking. At a regional level, COGS and MPOs can come together and say, maybe not consensus, but buy-in on a vision, knowing that each of their individual communities are affected in different ways. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about FR8 as a partner too. They're providing oversight. We talked about the funding opportunity, but their guidance and their process has been really helpful. They have lessons learned on successful and unsuccessful corridors that have been considered across the country, and so we want to stand on their shoulders. As much as all of us think about trains and have needs and wants and perspectives, whether it's placemaking or branding or the menu on the dining car, they help us focus on what's first. And so that leads me to the contracts. John talked about the operator, whether it's Amtrak or another entity, they're gonna have a business model on fares and pricing, labor, security, technology, and service that they'll bring to the table. And so that's a negotiation as Colorado makes that choice. Similar fleet is also a compelling and exciting idea with emerging technologies and understanding their safety, their readiness on our facility, the railroads' willingness to take that fleet on their facility, and the availability of that is also a lot of things that go into the fleet conversation and contract. And I think most important is the railroads themselves. We're talking about a public benefit. The railroads have a bottom line and have shareholders. And so how do we have that relationship? Where is that win-win where passenger rail and additional trains on their tracks is a perceived burden? So that's a very important conversation that Colorado has to be united and intentional about.
Okay, thank you, David. So, Deborah, if you could bring RTD's perspective.
Yes, thank you so much. And I would agree with everything that John and David said as we talk about partnerships. So I'll just expound and provide some clarification further to the vantage point in which RTD brings, recognizing that we are a regional transit provider, but relative to fast tracks, for all intents and purposes, relative to the comments that it was stalled for 15 years, I'd be remiss not to state that during the past 15 years, we were able to deliver on the ABG and N lines, in addition to the Southeast Rail Extension, as well as the Flatiron Flyer. So while we have not realized the Northwest corridor relative to having rail, I think this is a great opportunity to engage and have a discussion about the importance of partnerships. And one thing that's happening right now is working in tandem with the local jurisdictions so we can develop a common set of facts, and we're doing that through our Northwest Rail feasibility study. And recognizing that there's different needs. RTD may not know all the needs, but you all know the needs because you're living and working in those communities. We do understand that public transportation and transportation as a whole, or mobility I should qualify it as, is an economic generator. And oftentimes when we look at the mobility options that David made mention of, we have to think of other conveyances, not just those that are large, complex vehicles that require a lot of infrastructure. But with that, keeping in mind that one of the critical partners and one of the reasons it's been difficult to realize Northwest Rail is that RTD does not own the right-of-way. So picking up on what you said, BNSF is very critical. And where do I see linkages as we go forward? It's in the sense of understanding what it is that we don't know now, the operational costs, the designs, and there's synergy as we look at front range passenger rail because we don't know what we don't know until we get that common set of facts, and recognizing that we did have an opportunity, and it's critically important to RTD because we were able to sit down at the table with BNSF, and I have to commend my staff. The only time we could get a meeting was on a holiday, which was June 19th, and staff made sure they were at the table, and we recently have engaged in a contractual agreement where we can get information relative to what those operating costs are. And as we look at projections in reference to ridership and costs and things of the like, we're hoping we'll be in lockstep. And I meet regularly with the executive director of Front Range Passenger Rail because we both need that information. We don't know if the alignment will be along the Northwest corridor at this point in time, but it will be optimal. Recognizing we're the RNRTD and we provide commuter rail, it gives great synergy to the opportunity to bring forward intercity passenger rail. And we need to ensure that we have a comprehensive transportation network for the region, because not everybody's going to live close to a station. They need other options in which to get there, and we have to be willing to lean in at the table and have those conversations quite naturally in order to ensure that we bring this to fruition. And so, to the point that were raised, local communities, relative to TMOs, businesses, academia, not to mention our obvious partners being federal government, i.e. be it FTA, be it FRA, and the individual sitting at this table in and of itself. We have to be open to having conversations. We also have to ensure that we're courageous with those conversations and be vulnerable when we have those conversations, because we may get to a point where we're going to have to make tough decisions, and recognizing that we don't have to be disagreeable when we disagree. What's the end game that we're trying to achieve? And that's to move people in this mega region and ensure that it's competitive. And with that being said, RTD is here for it as we talk about support letters, as we talk about having experts within our ranks with our talent. We're willing to provide support letters and testify as been evidenced with recent trips in which we've taken part. So with that, I will yield the floor to my colleague to my right to get Amtrak's perspective.
Yeah, thank you. And Dennis, so just as before Dennis speaks, so a reminder, so Amtrak, we have not selected the operator for this corridor. Amtrak brings a lot to the table on that. And so we'll be looking at that in much more detail down the road. But given your experience in this area, Amtrak operating on freight rail corridors and in partnership with local transit, maybe you could address the prompt.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you, Claire. Yeah, and to that point, right? There's still a process to select an operator. We obviously have got a lot of experience as being an intercity passenger operator, and so can bring a lot of that experience to bear. But Amtrak is interested in seeing intercity passenger rail expand and succeed across America. So if somebody else is doing it, okay, great. Let's see it work. We'd love to be the ones to do it, but nevertheless. We really want to see intercity passenger rail succeed. So from all of the other panelists, you kind of have gotten a pretty good cross-section of all the different stakeholders. I mean, it really does start with the communities that are going to be served. So many of the people in this room represent partners that are very important. One of the members of our board of directors is former mayor of Macomb, Illinois, town that's served by one of our state-supported services. And as he always reminds us, is mayors and the local communities are critically important to support for the rail services that get provided. I mean, that's the service. The Illini and Saluki, the Carbondale service in Illinois, got started largely because there was a good amount of groundswell of support locally to make sure that could happen. And so it really starts with the local communities as being partners. And then you've kind of heard the litany from there. Obviously, we would, if we were the operator, whoever the operator is, would be working with the district and the state as and I'll come back to that a little bit. That's kind of one of the key contractual, when it gets to contracts, that's one of the key areas. But the railroads that the service would operate over is critical. At Amtrak, we own most of the Northeast Corridor, the railroad between Washington, D.C. and Boston. Not all of it, but most of it. But outside of that, almost 98% of our route miles are operated over somebody else's railroad. And David referenced that. And then we have partners, like RTD. We've got commuter railroads in the Northeast who operate over our railroad. So we're kind of on the other side of that equation there as well. So cooperation, getting a good agreement with the local entity, whether it be the state or a district that's going to support the service, and the railroads are key. There'll also be, in some cases, there might be contractual issues with owners of stations as the service development plan proceeds and it's determined where the stops will be and what the stations are going to be. You know, some of those stations might be owned by some private entity today, and so there'll be some work that will have to be done to figure out the access and how that's going to work. So a lot of different players that are involved. You heard the reference to the FRA, the Corridor Identification and Development Program is a great program. You know, we at Amtrak had put out our vision of where we thought intercity passenger rail could be successful around the country. Front Range was one of the routes that was on that vision. We're now sort of, you know, we like to think that helped with moving things along with the bipartisan infrastructure law and the program that now exists for development of corridors. But that really now is the vehicle that the Federal Railroad Administration's Corridor Identification and Development Program is the vehicle to move forward. And we're all excited to see the announcements coming out here in a few months as to which routes were selected. And there'll be, as referenced, a series, as John mentioned, a series of agreements that then need to be concluded with the FRA for the grants that will help provide the funding to be able to advance the corridor service. So a lot of different players. You know, we at Amtrak have got a lot of experience in this area. We currently work with 17 states, 19 different entities within those states to support 28 state-supported routes across the country. So this is kind of something we do every day. And we've got, one of the key contracts is we've got an annual operating agreement with the state or the entity that's supporting the service to provide that service. And that's one of the key elements that needs to be concluded to move the service forward once you get into operation. That's after all of the work on figuring out the capital and the infrastructure work that needs to be done to actually initiate the service. So lots of players, really exciting time, and we're looking to, whether we're the operator or not, looking forward to seeing success for Front Range passenger rail.
Well, thanks, Dennis. And we're going to stay with you now for the next question. We're going to have some individualized questions addressed to each panelist that really get into their particular area in more detail. So the question and the intro to the question are, so in Amtrak Connects Us, U.S. Corridor Vision, Amtrak describes expansion efforts that include adding the Cheyenne to Pueblo passenger rail service. The Front Range Passenger Rail District has applied for the FRA Corridor Identification Development Program, which we've heard about a little bit this morning. And assuming that we are accepted into that program and that Amtrak operates the service, what can the state of Colorado, the Northwest Metro Region, RTD, and all of the other partners that have been mentioned here this morning do to advance FRPR partnership with Amtrak?
All right, thanks for that question, Claire. You know, I think I'm gonna be shamelessly steal from Congressman Neguse. It really is partnership and perseverance because it will take a good bit of time to make things happen. So that's why the perseverance is important. You know, obviously, as we heard, folks out here have been at this for a long time. But it still is going to take a few more years to actually complete the service development plan that Front Range Passenger Rail District is working on right now. And then that identifies really the additional work and kind of some of the capital improvements that will be necessary to make a competitive intercity passenger rail service. So now then those improvements need to get made. Maybe not all of them might not have to be done before service could start, but there's going to be some phasing and probably some improvement. So it'll take a little bit of time. People need to stick with it. And I think, I mentioned that we have 28 state-supported service routes across the country right now, so that's evidence that, hey, you can get there, right? So it works. Actually, we heard this morning from Julie from WashDOT, so Cascades service is a service that I think in many ways is very similar to the service that we'd see along the Front Range. So it's kind of connecting up and down that I-5 corridor. Amtrak provides the Cascades service between Oregon and up to Seattle and then up to Vancouver, British Columbia. So that perseverance is going to be important. But the key thing is also the partnership. As you've heard everyone mention, there'll be a lot of work, a lot of agreements that need to get worked out, and having the local support to make sure that that folks are continuing to communicate the message that, hey, we see the benefit and the value in having this service come to fruition is going to be important to make sure that all of the various stakeholders and players are willing to stay at the table and engage and help us move forward. Because, as we talked about, the service would be operating most likely when the alignment is selected over freight railroads. So need to be able to get that cooperation and their agreement to make that happen. And then in the end, as much as you'd love to have public transportation like intercity passenger rail be profitable and covered by the revenue that's collected at the fare box, that's not really the way it works. So, it requires a subsidy. One of the things that we work at from our standpoint is to try to continually get more efficient and economies of scale by expanding our services. One of the ways we can get more efficient. But nevertheless, the amount of revenue that's collected from the riders does not match what it costs to operate the service. That's why we talk about all the other public benefits that are delivered by the service. And so the way that state-supported service works, at least if it's with Amtrak under the law PREA 209, is that the state or the other local entity, usually a state, but like in the instance of our Downeaster service in New England, it's provided by the Northern New England Passenger Rail Association as opposed to the state of Maine. But anyway, that entity basically provides the subsidy, the difference, most of the difference between the costs to operate and the revenue that's collected. So basically the taxpayers need to be committed and decide, can stick with it, that yes, this is something we want to have, and that's going to be necessary and helpful to be able to get the service into operation.
Okay, thank you, Dennis, for that. We're going to move to John Putnam again. And this is a multi-part question that's related to the IIJA legislation. You addressed a little bit of this in your opening comments, but could you please explain how funding through IIJA could advance rail expansion for Colorado? And as you respond to this question, keep in mind some additional questions about the level of competition across the country and accessing this support, which you've also alluded to, how the state of Colorado should position itself to have the best chance of winning this funding, and what advice you have for the Northwest region and our partners to successfully complete for this funding. And I think now that you're no longer at DOT, you might be able to answer a little more fully on that. Thanks.
That's right. I was mentioning, I think, out in the lobby, one of the disadvantages of actually being at DOT is you have to be scrupulously neutral across the country for all Americans and all the states, territories, districts. And now I can be shameless in my love of Colorado and the Front Range. So, really, I think hit some of the key parts of the first part of the question. We'll mention that there are other pots of money. Congress allocated $8 billion for the capital investment grants portions for FTA, $7.5 million for RAISE, which State Highway 119 got. There are a number of different pots of money that are out there. Every one of them is oversubscribed, with one or two small exceptions that are not relevant here. And so, the competition is stiff, and, need to be able to formulate, a very competitive application. And so persistence is important. 119 is informative. It was a success, but it took more than one try.